Very good. All right, everybody, we're going with a little bit of a cold open here to allow any stragglers to come in, so please enjoy this. As I expected, that gave an opportunity for some extra people to join us. Show of hands here, who has been watching the Olympics? A little bit. There's a room full of gamers here, most things. It's okay, it's fine. I haven't watched much of them myself. The Olympics that are currently running are just about done. They'll be wrapping up tomorrow. They'll be having their closing ceremonies, always big pageantry at the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympics. We just watched a few minutes of the opening ceremonies to the 1972 Winter Olympics that took place in Sapporo, Japan. And while opening ceremonies have become more and more elaborate over the years, the big celebratory visual spectacle in 1972 was 100 Japanese school children ice skating into the arena, holding multicolored balloons, and then cheering and letting the balloons fly up into the air. At that time, in 1972, one of those ice skating balloon children. Who's a 12-year-old guy who grew up to be somebody you might recognize. Yeah, President Iwata. Satoru Iwata grew up in Sapporo, and when the Olympics were just about to take place, there was a contest or a poll for participants. There was only a few that were selected, but he just happened to be picked out of everybody at his elementary school, two of his classmates. And so the three of them together were one of those trios that got to skate into the Winter Olympics and open the games 52 years ago. Isn't that crazy? That's probably my favorite little known fact about Mr. Iwata that I learned when I was doing research for this book that we'll get to talk about here in just a second. But first of all, who is this guy talking to you? A little bit about myself. My name is Lucas. I'm Lucas M. Thomas. I'm the editor-in-chief of Nintendo Fortune magazine. But first and foremost, I'm a dad. I've got 5 boys. All boys. Nobody can say that we can try for a girl runner. But I've got 5 video game loving boys. A couple of them are in attendance here today. Alvin here took second place in Pokemon Stadium 2 Kids Tournament yesterday. That's me. I'm editor-in-chief of Nintendo Fortune magazine. If you're not familiar with my magazine, we started up when Nintendo Power closed down. Nintendo Power ended in December 2012. We published our first issue exactly 1 month later, January 2013, and we've been going ever since. Print media has been dying. We are steadfast. We are sticking with it. We don't make a ton of money. We do it for the love of the games. We do it for the kids. I mean, I have memories of growing up and going to the mailbox and getting Nintendo Power out of the mailbox and being so excited to be holding in my hands, the next game announcements, the previews. It got me so excited. And Nintendo Power announced that they were shutting down when Carter was less than 1 year old. And I said, I'm not having that. I'm not having that for my kids. They're not going to grow up in a world without Nintendo Power. So we made the Nintendo Power replacement. We've been going ever since. In the 11 and a half years that we've been going, the single most popular issue we've ever done, issue number 17. Thank you, Mr. Iwata. Mr. Iwata passed away a little over 9 years ago. This was summer 2015. And we dedicated our whole next issue to him. We gave an overview of his life, his accomplishments, his achievements. He did so much beyond being just the president of Nintendo and the face of the Nintendo Direct that so many people came to know and love from his presence in their home announcing games. And we did as much as we could within the magazine format, but it still had to be one of our normal magazines, so there was a review of Yokai Watch in there and previews of upcoming games, so not a lot of the page count ended up being dedicated to Mr. Iwata. And that always aided me a little bit. So last year we expanded beyond just doing magazines. We got into book publishing. Our first book, we went to Kickstarter. We did The Impact of Iwata. We had a great response. And so you might be familiar with the book Ask Iwata. Great book. That is a compilation of Mr. Iwata's own writings from when he wrote for Satoru Iwata's website. And he's got lots of cool leadership insight, behind-the-scenes stories from being the president of Nintendo. That's a great book. I recommend it. Mr. Iwata never tooted his own horn. He never wanted to write his own autobiography. He didn't think anybody would be interested to read it. So it wasn't a complete chronicle of his life in existence anywhere. So I took it upon myself to pull that together and have some great figure stuff out. Each chapter gets into details of his life, and starting from the very beginning, which takes us back to our Olympic footage that we just went through. And let me tell you, I went through and I tried doing still screenshots just to see if there was any chance that I could pick out, in particular, which one of these kids was Iwata. And for footage from 1972, it's pretty good. But he's one of that group. One of these is him. He's in there somewhere. He grew up he was born in 1959. That was a time before video games really had taken off in any form anywhere on the planet. So through his childhood, video games weren't much a part of his life. All the way up through being about 12 years old during the early 70s, video games didn't play much of a factor into his life. But the funny thing is, the Olympics coming to Sapporo is what kicked off the chain of events that led him to becoming a video game icon. Whenever a city hosts the Olympics, they invest heavily in infrastructure. They make the city beautiful. They build new buildings. One of the things that Sapporo did is they radically upgraded their subway system. They wanted to modernize transit, so anybody from around the world that was coming to the city needed to move around to go to different venues to see the games. And part of what they did in that modernization of the subway system is they installed these computer kiosks. Interesting computers that were loaded up with different video games. Satoru Iwata went on one of these subway lines to get back and forth to school. He came across these computer kiosks that were there as a result of the Olympic contestants. He started playing games on these computers, his first exposure to video games. So we can thank the Olympics for playing a role and turning Satoru Iwata into a video game nerd. One of the cool things about Iwata was that whenever he started to play games, he didn't want to just play more games. He had a creative streak in his mind. He instantly wanted to create games. He said, "This is fun. How can I make this?" So he turned to the tools of the time, the best things that he had available to him in the 70s. He started out with an HP 67 calculator. Calculator that was wonderful for making programs, but had no visual display. So you had to imagine the graphics of what was going on in the games that he made. And he didn't let that hold him back. He created all kinds of games. He made a game based on Star Trek. He made a game based on volleyball. He was on the volleyball team in high school. He made a baseball game. You can see how the number pad is laid out 1 through 9, right? Now, you've seen the baseball broadcast on TV that have, for the viewers at home, they lay the strike zone in like a square. Like if the ball goes into that square, it's a strike. It just helps the viewer to know the strike zone. So he visualized the number pad to be a strike zone. So the gameplay was you had to press a number 1 through 9 for where you think the pitch is going to fly in the strike zone. If you got it exactly right, bam, hit, home run. If you picked the wrong number, if you were maybe 1 off, maybe you hit a single. If you were way off, like if you chose number 1 and the pitcher threw it into number 9 space of the strike zone, strike. Yeah. The imagination of this kid, this teenage guy, was such an amazing. Anyway, he did calculator games for years. He got to the point where he was so prolific with them that he started selling his calculator programs to Hewlett-Packard and other big companies so that they could promote their products with his games. That took him through high school. Whenever he moved on to college, he was able to take some money, some investment from his father, some money that he saved up from a job washing dishes, and he invested in this machine, Commodore PET, the PET, and that took him to the next level. It actually had a screen. He could actually make games that had graphics on it. He made games like this. This is Car Race 2. I can only assume that the original Car Race was a calculator game. We don't have exact records on that, but he called this one Car Race 2. And the PET continued to demonstrate his incredible creativity, his wonderful, wonderful eye for detail. The PET didn't support graphics in the way that we understand them, but you could take letters and blocks and O's and X's and you could cobble them together to create rudimentary graphics, which is what he did. He built these race cars out there and created this racing game. It was the first of many racing games that he created. Here's Iwata in 1986. One of the fun things about him is that he's always been one of the best dressed video game developers. Even when he was in his 20s, straight out of college, he wore a suit to work every day. Here he is, 1986 cream colored suit. I don't think you can pull that off anymore, but in 86 that was quite a look. So he made a name for himself with this group of guys and others. They created a company called HAL Laboratory. HAL Laboratory became one of the most important early developers for Nintendo. And so we start to get into Satoru Iwata's Nintendo years. Let me make sure that we're done with everything, get on time. All right. When you came in, there were cards on your seats. For the book, we did 16 chapters. We commissioned artists to create artwork. 16 of Mr. Iwata's biggest creations, biggest game franchises that he worked on. First one here you see, NES Pinball was the first game that he worked on for Nintendo as a contractor. Nintendo's own developers couldn't get it to work. They wanted to have a pinball game on the Famicom. The programming was too complicated for them. And just think about it. Think about that half being set before you, right? A pinball rolling down the table, picking up speed as it rolls, ricocheting off of flippers, bouncing off of this wall, bouncing off of rubber bands. And how do you visualize that? How do you capture that using the programming technology of 1983? Right? He was the only one that was able to do it. He was able to program NES Pinball, and it became foundational for every pinball game to come afterwards. Golf. Again, Nintendo wanted to have a golf game for their Famicom. They went to different developers. Every developer that they went to told them they couldn't do it. 18-hole golf course is too much data to fit into Generation 1 Famicom cartridge. They couldn't do it. Satoru Iwata said, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. He created a trailblazer compression routine that allowed all of that data, a full 18-hole golf course, to fit into the cartridge. Again, absolutely unheard of, 1983. The craziest thing is the golf course actually makes sense as a complete golf course when laid out together in bird's eye view. Blows my mind. One of the games that he's most known for, Balloon Fight. Nintendo created an arcade version of Balloon Fight using their own in-house developers. Iwata wasn't working for Nintendo at this time, right? He was still working for HAL Laboratory. He was a contractor for all these projects. They created an arcade version of Balloon Fight, and it was a pretty good game, right? It was Nintendo's version of Joust. You fly around through the air, pop the other guy's balloons without getting your balloons popped. The home version went to Iwata. Iwata, with his ingenious programming ideas, he came up with a different way to calculate the physics of flying through the air by flapping your arms and having balloons attached to your back. He used this cool decimal calculation that made the gameplay so much smoother than the arcade version. And if you go and you play both of them, You might be able to find them here on the show floor. You play the arcade version and it's kind of choppy. You play the home version that the water programmed and it's just smooth flowing. To the point where he started attracting notice from Nintendo's developers more and more. Developers like Satoru Iwata, who was working on a game called Super Mario Bros. And he said, you know that fluid movement that guy Iwata created for balloon fight? What if we just take his code and reuse it for all the swimming levels in Super Mario Bros.? So Satoru Iwata worked on Super Mario Bros. The very first one. He was there at the beginning. He did the first pinball game. He did the first golf game. He did the balloon fight. He was there from the beginning of the Mario series. Over and over and over again, he was there in these foundation phase. Anytime you played a swimming level in a Mario game, that's some of Iwata's handiwork. Ripples of the rock that he originally threw in the pond. Namco came onto the scene in the arcades with a great game called Pole Position. You played Pole Position, right? Absolutely blew anything else away in the arcades in 1984. Nintendo had no answer to it. Nintendo was marketing their Famicom saying, we've got the arcade experience at home. Anything that you see in the arcade, we've got something just as good at home on the Famicom. Save your quarters, save your yen, come and buy our games. They put out Pole Position, Nintendo had no answer to it. Nobody at Nintendo could figure out how to do a complex raster scrolling technique to capture that insane sense of speed. Iwata said, I'll do it. He figured out how to do it. He created a game called F1 Race that was only ever released in Japan, but after that, they used the same technology to create Mock Rider, which is on the show floor here in the racing section. Go check that out. A racing game that was also a bit of a battle game because you rode on this motorcycle that had machines attached to it, so you could shoot the bad guys in your way. After that, the same technology was used for a game called 3D Hot Rally, Famicom Grand Prix 2, which has Mario and Luigi. He was part of the first Mario racing games. That was the first game that he worked on in partnership with Miyamoto. Again, he was there at the beginning. This is another piece of artwork that I commissioned for the book. And have you seen the meme of the guy, he's like the physics teacher, and he's about to push over the tiny little domino, and then that one's going to knock over the next domino, and the next, and the next, and the next. That was Iwata's life. That was Iwata's career. He made these critical programming contributions to these games in the early 80s, and his work led to the next game in the series, led to the birth of the next franchise, just one thing after another. He was so influential from such an early age. He was just a college kid doing these games to begin with. Fresh out of college, 22, 23 years old, he was doing these games. And he was building up a reputation for himself with Nintendo, making him an invaluable member of their extended family. Still, he was just working in Halo. He wasn't officially working in Nintendo. He gained such a reputation that companies beyond Nintendo started reaching out to him whenever they were having difficulty with their products. Satoru Iwata did the localization programming for Dragon Warrior. He's the reason that Dragon Quest came to the West for the first time. Dragon Quest, if you've ever gone back and seen Dragon Quest 1, the Japanese version, very, very rudimentary. The hero character has no animation. He just kind of slides around the screen. The NPCs, again, are just static. They have no animation. Whenever you talk to a character, you have to press A and then input a direction, and then press A again. Very, very clumsy. So that version came out in Japan in 1986. Dragon Warrior didn't come to America until 1989, and they said, we have to polish up this game or people are not going to go for it. You want to redid the graphics engine to add in animations, and the whole overworld experience flow better. He got rid of the cumbersome extra menus that you had to use. He implemented the save system. We would have had these laboriously long passwords that we would have had to write down in notebooks, but Iwata introduced battery save. Dragon Warrior didn't do great in America right off the bat, but if Iwata hadn't introduced the improvements that he did, it would have been absolutely dead on arrival. He set up that entire franchise, the most popular in the history of Japan, to have success outside of Japan. Kirby, why not? Let's give him credit for another series. He was the guy. By this time, by the early 90s, Iwata had proven himself so much at PAL that he had become president of PAL. He had gone from being their programmer in the early 80s to in the 90s he was named their president. And he tapped on the shoulder of a new young guy named Masahiro Sakurai, which you might have heard of, and said, hey, I want you to take the lead for this new game called Tingle Topo. That was the original title. Good that they didn't go with that title. But it translated so well overseas. Tingle Topo they developed, and they were in such a financial strait. They made some bad decisions at how they were on the verge of bankruptcy. I can't go into full details. The book goes into much more detail. But he rightly recognized with the Kirby's Dream Land project that video games had become too complicated, too complex. Think about Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, the fighting games of that same era, and you pick them up and you want to perform the special moves, and you have to do this, first circle, back circle, this, press this, you know, games had gone too far in that direction. He looked at that and he said, we need to go the complete opposite way. We need to create a game that anybody can play and anybody can finish. So the original Kirby's Dream Land, super short, super simple, easy movements. You can fly forever, so it's easy for kids to just get over any obstacle if they take enough time. They retooled that game until it was right, and it ended up selling 5 million copies and got HAL back on the road to financial viability, saved them from bankruptcy. As president, in the 6 years following the release of Kirby's Dream Land, he was able to bring them back from a 1.5 trillion yen debt. Just absolutely ridiculous, some crazy number. But year by year, he was able to pay it back, pay it back, pay it back. And by 1998, they were debt free. Incredible programmer, incredible businessman. Wonderful one. How about another game, Earthbound? Any Earthbound fans here? Yeah? Mother 2 would not have existed without Iwata. Mother 2 was in terrible shape. She was in a development quagmire that had lasted for years. Satoru Iwata and his team, they had completed Mother 1, they had shipped it, right? You would think they got one game under their belt, they should be able to turn around and do the sequel. But they were languishing for years. They were years behind schedule. They called in Iwata for help. He came in, met with the staff, met with Itoi, and he famously said, okay, I've taken an assessment of your product. We could stick with what you've got, and then it's going to take us 2 years to finish development on this game. Or we could start from scratch, and we'll be done in 6 months. Itoi very humbly agreed to the 6-month timeline, and they were able to get that game finished and completed. 30th anniversary of its release is coming up in just a couple of weeks. August 27th, 1994 is when that game hit shelves. It went on sale in Japan. 1 year later, the localized version 1995 came out here in America as for hit after hit after hit. Let's give him credit for some more. Pokemon! He was there from the beginning of the Pokemon series. He helped set up the companies that still run Pokemon to this day. He helped with the programming of the original Pokemon Red and Green. He helped with the programming of Pokemon Gold and Silver. When Game Freak was so underwater with pressure, Pokemon came out and just was fabulously popular right off the bat. And then they had expectations on them. They said, you've got to do the sequel. You have to do a version for the Nintendo 64. You have to do this anime. They were juggling so much. The 3D version, Pokemon Stadium, did count them, second place finisher. Pokemon Stadium 2. Pokemon Stadium, they couldn't figure out the programming on that. They brought in Iwata. Iwata recreated the entire battle system for Pokemon Stadium in a week. He squirreled himself away in an office, sat down with his computer, knocked it out, brought it back to them the following Monday, said, here you go. Insane. Pokemon, of course, has gone on to become the #1 media property in the world. In the early days of Pokemon, there were some news outlets that said, this is a fad, this isn't going to last. I have this book that was written in 2003, this very scholarly report like, oh, well, Pokemon has come and gone, so let's assess the end of this trend. Insane. There are over 1,000 Pokemon characters in existence now. The games have sold millions of copies. It's crazy. Another one, Super Smash Brothers. You've never played the Super Smash Brothers game? Super Smash Brothers was created on a lark. Masahiro Sakurai and Satoru Iwata were messing around after hours and said, let's put together a prototype for a fighting game. They put together this game that they called Dragon King. That was just guys punching each other, getting knocked off of platforms. You scored a point by knocking the other guy off the edge of the screen. The basics were there. Iwata programmed the whole thing. Then, using his connections with Nintendo and the reputation that he built up with them, he got in a room with Miyamoto and negotiated for the rights to bring in all of the iconic characters from Nintendo to be the cast. And that became the glue, that became the draw. I mean, Smash Brothers would be a fun fighting game if it was just generic characters, sure. But the fact that you get Kirby and Ness and Pikachu and Samus and Link, and they're all crossing over into each other's worlds and beating each other up, yeah, that was a lot. Brain Age. Who ever played Brain Age or were introduced it to your parents? I got my mom and dad going on Brain Age when that was brand new, and they loved it. Again, Iwata's idea. They were planning the rollout of the Nintendo DS system. They needed new software that was going to appeal to more people. They got in a meeting with the high-up guys at Nintendo. He was working at Nintendo Silent Night at the time. And one of the guys in the room, the oldest guy in the room, said, there aren't really any games for me. We don't really make games for older people, the older generation. And at the same time, there was a book series that had gained popularity in Japan, written by Dr. Ryuta Kawashima, and it was about exercising your brain, training your brain, doing mental problems, working every day to keep your cognition, from slowly declining as you age. And he said, I wonder what we can do to create a game version of this book. And so on the day that the Nintendo DS launched, Iwata skipped out on any photo ops. He was the president of Nintendo, right? You would think that he would be at one of the big game stores in Akihabara, they're smiling for the camera somewhere. No, he left on a plane. He went to this neuroscientist, Dr. Ryuta Kawashima, sat down with him and showed him a prototype of the game that would become Brain Age. He knew that he didn't need to be there on day one for the Nintendo DS to become successful. He knew that he needed to be in meetings to ensure that the DS would become continuously successful beyond day one. and brain age became the game that propelled them into a whole new market. This expanded audience he liked to talk about, and he achieved it. He achieved it with the DS, he achieved it with the Wii, which was the next system that he helped to shepherd. Wii bowling, with worldwide, viral, Wii baseball, Wii boxing, these motion-controlled games. Iwata had the vision for expanding the audience of video gamers beyond people who were comfortable sitting down again with controllers that just were filled with buttons. He said, we're going to make the next system. The controller is going to be a TV remote. We're going to call it the Wii, because you can't say it without smiling. This man was absolutely insane, and he was absolutely on the money so many times. He didn't get everything right. The 3DS struggled. The Wii U, probably a misfire in lots of ways. He took responsibility whenever his ideas didn't pan out. But so many of his ideas did. So many of his ideas were legendary. And here's our artwork for the Nintendo Direct chapter of the book. So many people met Iwata when he took on another job, becoming the public face of the company, becoming the guy that entered into your home once every couple of months to say, here's the new games that we're working on. Please look forward to them. Please get excited. That's how so many people met him.
What are the bananas?
The bananas? Okay, who knows what the bananas mean, right? All right, what do bananas mean?
It was a meat. I saw it when they were doing promotion for Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze.
Yes. Yep. In the video presentation from the E3 where they were talking about Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, there was a moment of a few seconds, just completely out of nowhere, that the camera cuts back to Iwata, and he doesn't say anything. He's just standing there staring at a bunch of bananas. He never explained. He just looked at the bananas for 5 seconds, then looked back at the camera. Like, oh, you're here. I should start talking again. He had such a ridiculous, playful personality, and that came through in the Nintendo Directs. He would be on camera, just giving business announcements, standing in front of a white background a lot of times. But then he also did comedy sketches. Right? He put on a Luigi hat with Mr. Miyamoto, and they chased each other around with the Poltergeist for Luigi's Mansion, and that was coming out dark noon. Yeah.
There was also the Super Smash Bros. Wii U, when it introduced the Meat Fighter and the Reggie.
That's right. When they introduced the Mii Fighters at that E3, that was 10 years ago, they introduced the concept of the Mii Fighters using a Iwata Mii and a Reggie Mii, and they did a live-action fight they choreographed between Iwata and Reggie. Hilarious. Iwata meant so much to so many people. Finally, people got to see him in front of the camera, got to know a little bit about him through the Nintendo Directs. He was such an incredible, legendary president, and that's why it was so hard whenever he suddenly passed away in 2015. He came down with bile duct cancer, and he sought treatment for it and made him miss E3 2014. And that was concerning, right? But then after he went through that surgery, the report went out that the surgery went well, everything was looking good, he was on the mend. So most people that were really invested in the Nintendo world at that time thought that, okay, we made it through this scare, but he's fine, he's going to be okay. Then we missed E3 again the next year. And it wasn't but a couple of weeks after that he suddenly passed away in July 2015. After he died, he was only 55 years old. He would have still been president today. He would have still. But so many of the things, so many of the games, the projects that were in the works, up through 2015 had his fingerprint on it. He was there. He led the early development for the Nintendo Switch. It didn't go on sale until 2017, but he was the visionary behind it. He was there guiding the developers who made The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So, he was there. All right, we'll get more into it. I want everybody to remember the life of this man. Remember the impact that he had. Beyond him just being the public face of the company, being the smiling guy that did Nintendo Direct videos, wanted to bring to light all of these contributions that he did over the years, so that we can remember him, remember his lasting impact, because the games, the franchises, the series, everything that he did, just the example of his leadership, creating the corporate culture behind the scenes of Nintendo, is still reverberating to this day. And so today I'm happy to announce the Iwata collection. And nope, not an actual Why would you think it? I don't have to watch it. What are you doing? But a lot of the games that we have talked about, if you want to fully appreciate the life and career of Satoru Iwata, there are so many of the games that he worked on that are already available on Nintendo Switch. And I just wanted to, let me check how much time we've got. We've got time. So I wanted to give a run through. You guys are going to have homework. You gotta go home after this expo is over. You got to play some of these games. You got to think about Iwata and his impact and the cool stuff that he did. Pinball. Pinball is available on Nintendo Switch Online. If you are the kind of person to be attending Long Island Retro Gaming Expo in person, then you probably are a subscriber to Nintendo Switch Online. If you're not, get a free trial. You can get a 7-day free trial and play a lot of the games that we're about to talk about. Pinball. He created the physics for this game. He created the screen transitions that no game had ever done before. The ball starts in the top half of the pinball table, but then whenever it hits the bottom, it instantly transitions. And that seems so simple, but that's just something that had never been done before. He was the first guy that did it. He programmed the bonus stage that stars Mario, and I'm giving you a challenge for a lot of these. The challenge is you have to reach the bonus stage and then survive long enough to save Pauline when she falls. So it's kind of like a breakout game. The ball bounces back and forth between Mario and this barrier up here that's underneath her. So you bounce the ball long enough and the barrier erodes, Pauline falls down, you save her, you get a bunch of bonus points. Pinball, a great game to go and play. HAL continued after they developed pinball. They made lots of other pinball games. These games are not yet available on Nintendo Switch Online. I'm hoping that they will be added because each of them seems like a viable possibility. Revenge of the Gator, great HAL pinball game on Game Boy. Kirby's Pinball Land, Pokemon Pinball. They created this physics engine, right, that kept being used over and over again. They kept adding different themes on top of it, different characters on top of it. Created an entire legacy. Golf. From day one on the Nintendo Switch, golf was hidden in the code as an homage to Mr. Iwata. Somebody figured out how to access it, and then they patched it out because it wasn't meant to be accessed. It was meant to be an omamori. It was meant to be a hidden secret. But finally, just last month, they added this game to the NSO lineup. Go and check out golf. Because not only did he fit 18 holes worth of content into this game, he was also instrumental in coming up with the power meter. The core way that golf games operate, that you press the button and the little cursor starts moving. You press the button the second time and it sets the power. The cursor starts going back the other way. You press the button the third time and it sets the accuracy of the shot. Such an easy, fundamental, no-brainer way to interpret golf as simply as possible, but nobody had ever done it before. Iwata did. Golf has a huge legacy. Lots and lots of other golf games are available on the Switch right now. NES Open Tournament Golf was the evolution of the 8-bit era of golf games. Iwata responsible for all of those. Mario Golf on the N64. The Game Boy Color version, if you never played that one, that was really cool. It's actually a golf RPG. Not a lot of people know that. It's not just a golf game. This is when Camelot took over. They took the torch from Iwata, right? Because the games that we're going over are games that Iwata worked on directly himself, but then also those that were inspired, right? Other developers took the torch from him and ran with it. So in the mid-90s, Camelot became the developers for Mario Golf, and they're still responsible for that series to this day. Another HAL Golf game, Kirby's Dream Course. That's on NSO. Check it out. Wii Sports and Nintendo Switch Sports. This is so cool. The design of the holes in NES Golf from 40 years ago are still used. The very same layouts. The fairways are in the same place, the greens are in the same place, the sand traps are in the same place. I've got a page where I do a visual comparison of them directly so you can see how spot on they are. But yeah, the golf course was reused in Wii Sports and then it was reused again in Nintendo Switch Sports. So you're getting like the super HD version of the original course that Iwata worked on.
And there's also the kind of this system golf game that I forget the name.
Yep.
They like had a whole contest with that where you like fax your results and something.
Yep.
And that's where the little punch out cards from Japan.
That's right. They did Golf US course, Golf Japan course. They did a golf game starring a Japanese star called Jumbo Ozaki. They didn't ever bring that one to the United States because nobody in the United States knew who Jumbo Ozaki was. Balloon fight. Yes. Someone in the vendor area, I walked past. Somebody is selling an inbox copy of Balloon Fight for $400. Yeah. If you've got deep pockets, you can bring home a wonderful, wonderful Iwata treasure as a souvenir from this weekend. Balloon Fight, you gotta check it out. Balloon Trip Mode, make the orange balloons appear. That's the challenge for this one. Who's ever watched Game Center CX? Chief Arino, right? The Japanese basically game show. This guy, this comedian, plays really hard old retro video games and just suffers through them. And the comedy comes from the fact that he keeps losing over and over. Mr. Iwata appeared on an episode with him, and the two of them worked together to try to get 20 balloons popped in a row in Balloon Trip Mode. We're good. We're rolling on time. The arcade version of Balloon Fight that I mentioned that has choppier physics and was not done by Iwata is available in the Switch eShop if you want to do a direct comparison. Hamster Corporation does the Arcade Archives series. You can buy that for $7.99 in the eShop, and you can play it first and then play Iwata's version, and you can appreciate Iwata's version so much better. Joust. He did the programming on that. That was actually one of the original games that Nintendo commissioned him to make. When Nintendo was trying to bring the NES into America, their original plan was not to sell it themselves, but to sell it to Atari and let the Atari Entertainment System, or whatever they would have called it, maybe it would have been the 7800 or whatever. Atari passed. Worst business decision ever. So Nintendo went ahead and did it themselves, but through that process, one of the games that they had Iwata program as like a pitch to Atari to say, look, this game, this console that we have made is able to reproduce arcade games in a better, more fundamental, more quality way than ever. Anyway, Iwata made Joust on NES, check it out. Balloon Trip Breeze is a mini game in Nintendo Land on Wii U. It's very cool. You can play it. You can use Mr. Iwata's Wii character when you do. Super Mario Brothers. Played this before. Go and play it again. The challenge is reach the minus world. You never reach the minus world. It's tricky. It's hard to do. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Get to just World 2-2, and you can enjoy the swimming physics that Iwata came up with. Every swimming game that came afterwards is part of the legacy of that. Go play Super Mario Brothers 3. Put on the frog suit. Enjoy the revision of the swimming physics in that. Check out Donkey Kong Country right? Iwata didn't work on that directly, but that's what I'm saying. He worked on these games that then inspired the games that came afterwards. The Starfy series, just a couple of weeks ago, the first 3 games in the Starfy series came to NSO. Check them out. That is a series that is based entirely on underwater movement. One of Nintendo's unsung franchises. Mock Ryan, go play this game. Don't be too frustrated, it's really hard. It is really difficult. So my challenge for this one was to just complete one race. Again, it's on NSO as of a couple of weeks ago. Give it a try. Nintendo's in-house developers were so shamed at their inability to create the fast-paced racing games on the NES that they challenged themselves to level up their programming skills. So when the next console generation came around, they were going into the Super Nintendo era. Nintendo's own in-house programmers were able to create the F-Zero series. They were able to create the Super Mario Kart series. More pieces of Iwata's legacy. F-Zero 99. It's a cool game. It's on that search, you know? Mario Kart 8. And Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I believe the #1 best-selling Nintendo game in history at this point. It sold more copies than the NES sold consoles. This is a really cool piece of Iwata's legacy because this is still the current Mario Kart game, and Iwata was there 10 years ago. He was still alive, he was still with us when this game was introduced in its Wii U version. He was the guy in Nintendo Direct that said, please take a look at this next trailer and introduce Mario Kart 8. Over a decade of history, it's still got Iwata's thumbprint. Dragon Warrior not on NSO. Seek it out on cartridge if you can. Complete the entire adventure. Very, very cool to go back and revisit this. It's a great game, if you can, if you have time. I've got to move a little bit
It is
faster.
on the Switch.
There is a version.
Great ports.
There is a version on the Switch. The version that's on the Switch is not the version that Iwata worked on. So do seek out Iwata's version if you can. But if you've never played the original installment in the Dragon Warrior Dragon Quest series before, there is a new remake that's coming out at the beginning of next year. Dragon Quest 3 remake is coming out in November, and then remakes of 1 and 2 are coming early 2025. So do check those out. Iwata loved Dragon Quest so much that when he was president of Nintendo, he talked to Yuji Horii, he talked to the executives at Square Enix. He made versions of all these classic Dragon Quest games happen for his baby, his console, the first machine that he created as the president of Nintendo, the DS. He got them to do remakes of 4 and 5 and 6, leading up to the release of Dragon Quest IX, which he negotiated for as an exclusive for Nintendo, which was a huge coup for them. Another great game. It continued on. After he passed away, they continued to honor that agreement. They shipped remakes of 7 and 8 for the 3DS with additional content. They wanted to please Iwata. They loved Iwata so much. One of the last promises that they made to Iwata, Square Enix's developers, promised Iwata that they would put Dragon Quest XI on the Switch. And it took a few years. It took until in 2019, that was after, a few years after he passed away, they finally did. And they said, finally, we have fulfilled our final promise to President Iwata.
What was the 3DS version of Dragon Quest before that?
The 3DS version of Dragon Quest XI shipped in Japan, but he had specifically asked them to bring it to the next Nintendo home console.
Oh.
So yeah, that was the promise there. Kirby's Dream Land, check that out. Easy to run through. Complete the entire game. It'll only take you 30 minutes to run through it. It's on NSO. There's tons and tons of Kirby stuff on NSO. The direct sequel, Kirby's Adventure, when they introduced power copying for the first time. Kirby didn't copy powers in the first game. What do you know? Kirby's Dream Land 2, when he gets Animal Friends. Kirby Superstar, one of the games that springboarded Masahiro Sakurai into his career as a director. Iwata was always leading up. He was always bringing up the next developers to follow after him and setting them up for success. Earthbound, it's on NSO. Play it. It wouldn't exist. It wouldn't have shipped without him. The other Earthbound games. Earthbound Beginnings is on NSO. Iwata didn't have anything to do with it, but check it out. It's good game. Mother 3. It's only in Japanese, but if you do the right account settings on your Switch, you can play it too. Pokemon Stadium. It's on NSO. He programmed the entire battle system in a week. Play it. Pokemon Snap. He created a new development team with Miyamoto and some others, and they came up with this brand new, never before seen game genre, this virtual photo safari. Play Snap, play Stadium 2, play Mystery Dungeon. I don't think he had much to do with it, but it just was added to NSO yesterday, so Smash Brothers, not on NSO yet. Hopefully it'll be added at some point. Until then, you can play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Again, he was there for the beginning of development of the game on Wii U and 3DS, which transformed and was added to and ultimately became Ultimate. And completing Ultimate and all of its DLC was the final marching orders that Sakurai had from Iwata. Sakurai felt a great sense of accomplishment when that was finally done. Rain Age, again, not on NSO, but there is a sequel that came out just in Europe that you can check out. Big Brain Academy is available on the Switch. Most of these are on the Switch. Lots and lots of Iwata's legacies on the Switch. Throwing it back to one last retro pick, Adventures of Lolo. He was there for the creation of the whole Eggerland series through the 80s. That was Hound's big franchise before Kirby came along. And after Kirby was introduced, Lolo became a cameo character in the Kirby series and didn't really get his own games anymore. Iwata worked on Ghostbusters 2 in Japan. He worked on NCAA basketball, helping them program the first 3D basketball game. He was there to lead the development and set the right people up to create the WarioWare franchise. He did so much, guys. He played a role in so much of Nintendo's history. And of course, you have to play Breath of the Wild and the direct homages that they put into this game to celebrate his life and his legacy. He made one of the NPCs look just like him. He patrols the foothills of Satoru Mountain. And if you go up on Satoru Mountain, you can encounter the Lord of the Mountain, the great sage character who is the reincarnated spirit of a sage who passed away. And you can ride it, yes. It functions as a horse. That legacy continued into Tears of the Kingdom. If you watched the Super Mario Brothers movie last year, Satoru Iwata's name is in the credits because he started Nintendo on the path to expanding their IP beyond video games. That was an initiative that he started before he passed away, and it finally came to fruition in the record-shattering success of the Super Mario Brothers animated movie last year. This kid, this 12-year-old ice skating kid, who skated his way into the opening ceremony of the 1972 Winter Olympics. Who knew that he would grow up to have such a lasting legacy, such an enduring impact? Satoru Iwata deserves to be remembered. He deserves to be celebrated. I hope that you go home and play some of his games and think about his life and his lasting legacy. He's my favorite developer. Nobody will ever take it.